Welcome back to State of the Nation. The Labour government has committed another attack on democracy. After weeks of budget leaks, attempts to reverse Brexit and introducing digital ID, today it announced that 4 mayoral elections set for May of next year will be postponed until 2028, by which time the voting system will have changed. Voters in Essex, Hampshire and the Solent, Sussex and Brighton and Norfolk and Suffolk are being denied the opportunity to choose who runs their region.
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
The government reasons that it needs more time to transition towards combined authorities under its devolution plans. Prime Minister responded this afternoon.
There are various arrangements being put in place to ensure all the election could take place at the right time, depending on the configurations of the council and other arrangements.
Isn't that wonderful? Elections have to take place at the right time. Do you think that means at the right time when he can win them? Has he become the Kim Jong-un of British politics? Only hold elections when you've stuffed the ballot boxes in advance. Anyway, when asked by lobby journalists to apologise on 5 separate occasions, Sir Keir's spokesman refused to do so. He then went on to confirm that Number 10 cannot say that the 2028 target will be achieved, but that it is minded to get there, in brackets, as long as it thinks Labour can do respectably. The 4 areas have a combined electorate of more than 7 million people. It's 10% of the country. That is 7 million people denied a democratic voice. Cancelling elections is a bad practice that should only be carried out in a national crisis. Elections were delayed during the First and Second World Wars to avoid disrupting the war effort. In 2001, local elections were delayed a month when foot and mouth disease broke out. And in 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, some local and mayoral elections were postponed by a year. But all of these delays were implemented with cross-party support. Delaying elections in the absence of a national crisis is quite improper, particularly if there isn't cross-party support, because it simply suggests a government that is frightened of voters. So what do these areas have in common? A rise in support for reform.
So you really could say to yourself, there is absolutely no reason why these elections should not go ahead. But then there is, of course, one very big reason. An electoral calculus put out their figures just a couple of hours ago that Reform would have won all 4 of these contests and would have won them quite comfortably. The government are basically committing electoral fraud upon the electorate, who had every opportunity to put Reform mayors in place.
Nigel Farage is accusing the government of a politically motivated decision to cancel elections. And the numbers agree. Today, Electoral Calculus published its predictions for each area. In Essex, Labour is on 14% and Reform over double on 29%. In Hampshire, Reform is on 31%, again more than double Labour on 14%. Norfolk and Suffolk, 14% for Labour, 36% for Reform, and in Sussex and Brighton, 16% for Labour and 29% for Reform. The numbers show Reform victories and a Labour humiliation in all 4 of these areas. Labour is running scared of Reform. So it's not only the cancelling of the vote, but it's also using this extra 2 years to change the voting system from first past the post to a proportional system, which would make it harder for Reform, but is better for Labour's lefty friends. Because, of course, it's frightened of suffering an electoral collapse. MPs don't want to accept that the support they won in these areas just a year and a half ago has vanished like the dew in the dawn. Ultimately, this is a strategy to protect the Prime Minister. A sinister strategy, so Labour MPs are not forced to realise quite how badly they're doing and how badly their leader is doing. When losses of this magnitude, as the data suggest, would happen, MPs have no choice but to question whether their party leader is up to the job. But there is a larger issue at play. Labour doesn't like democracy. Its motive for cancelling the elections is the same as that which drives the European reset. They want to give power back to the bureaucrats at the European Union, back to the supranational organisation that we not only voted to leave, but that we voted to have no power left over our way of life. Disdain for democracy is a fundamental characteristic of socialism. More government, less individual liberty. Removal of the means to voice dissent. These council elections are merely the latest example.
Every time you're online, your money and your identity are at risk. Scams now make up nearly 40% of all crime in the UK. That's thousands of attacks every single day. In Britain, someone has their identity stolen every 2 minutes, leaving victims with wrecked finances and years of stress. The threat is real, and you could be next. ExpressVPN is your shield against criminals. It locks down your devices, hiding your personal information and financial details from hackers, scammers, and anyone else looking to exploit you. So whether you're checking your bank, shopping, or just browsing, ExpressVPN makes you invisible to prying eyes trying to steal your money and your identity. ExpressVPN shields your data with military-grade AES 256 encryption. That's the same standard trusted by the US government to guard classified information. This is the highest level of online security you can get. So don't wait for disaster. Secure up to 14 devices at once and get powerful password protection. Real support is available 24/7 because cybercrime never sleeps. Save up to 73% on annual plans today. Every moment you hesitate is another moment you're exposed. Protect your money and protect your identity. Get ExpressVPN right now.
First of all, let me come to you, Nigel Nelson, before I come to Claire Pistol in a moment. Is there a defence that the government can make? Because 2 years seems a very long time, and its excuse that we're not ready is pretty weak, isn't it?
Well, the excuse is incompetence, isn't it? Because the whole thing is that local government reorganisation has been a shambles. And what the government should have done is prepared for this properly. They should have these elections on time, no question about that. But given they didn't do any of those things, what it means is there any point in electing mayors who will have nothing to mayor? They've got to actually put everything in place, ready for them to actually operate. They can't do that for another 2 years. I get the point. I mean, I don't think it's ideal. I think that the government have got questions to answer. You mentioned Number 10 briefing journalists today and refusing to apologise for it. Of course they should apologise for it.
But isn't it quite useful to have the mayors in place to say that actually we think it should be structured like this, and in our local area this will work and that won't, rather than thinking it can all be done in a top-down way? That the elected mayor, even if the office hasn't been fully established, would have a very useful view on how it might work.
Well, yes, but I mean, there's nothing to stop the candidates putting forward views in the meantime before those elections come up in 2 years' time. I just think that you actually need everything in place before you start trying to run local government. And if they're looking for an advisory role about what they'd like to see, each candidate can do that.
Claire, isn't the government in the position where everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and they then look deeply shifty? So they want to stop trial by jury. They want compulsory ID cards of one kind or another. They are now cancelling elections. It makes them look a really authoritarian, anti-liberty government.
Well, it certainly does. And you wonder which is the next set of elections that's going to be cancelled by the Labour government. Is that a general election? Because they don't like it, it's not very favourable to them. Are they going to push that into the long grass? But I disagree with Nigel on one point, that you have to have those mayors in place. And I think you're right. With any kind of reorganisation, it's going to be those elected officials who will take up the mantle. So they need to have their say in how this is going to work first before you start trying to slot them in later.
I mean, I don't think they're going to try and delay a general election. But there is a but. Under the 1911 Parliament Act, the one thing that the House of Lords has to consent to is the extension of a period of 5 years before you have an election. Labour is getting rid of the hereditaries, who are mainly not Labour, almost entirely not Labour, and is about to appoint another 25 peers, giving itself closer to a majority in the House of Lords. It seems to me they're giving themselves the ability to do this by fiddling the House of Lords at the same point as they're cancelling elections. It's not really a proper way to be running the country.
Well, of course it's not. It's only a proper way to run a country if you're a dictator such as Putin or Kim Jong-un or someone like that, who doesn't really care about the will of the people. Unfortunately for Keir Starmer, he's never liked the referendum result, and he certainly doesn't particularly like the way the council elections have gone against him so far, and he's looking at a set of elections next year which are going to be particularly difficult.
Nigel, does Keir Starmer not understand how bad this looks when his government is so low in the polls? Reform is in the polls likely to win all these mayoral contests. The natural conclusion is not they're running away from it because they're incompetent, but they're running away from it because they're frightened.
I think your first point was absolutely right. He doesn't know exactly how bad this looks. That's why he wouldn't have done it if there was a way of going ahead. And at the moment, you've got elections coming up in Cumbria and Cheshire. So at least we're getting some of them off the ground. 200 million quid is being made available to get the process going. All this should have happened a year ago, but it didn't. And as a result of that, they can't go ahead with these ones.
Is it actually the case that this devolution process is stupid and changing all the councils is a terrible waste of money and they should drop the whole thing?
That is a different matter. I mean, the idea of local government reorganisation is always complicated. What do you do when you scrap, for instance, 2 district councils where council tax in one is £100 a month, in the other £150 a month? Which one do you choose? They're arguing over things like that now. A lot more thought should have gone into this. My own view is the whole thing should be put back to the next Parliament.
And therefore cancel the plans for reorganisation and carry on with county councils until you've got it organised.
Until you've actually sorted out exactly what you want to do. And the only way I can see that can happen is if you put it back into next Parliament.
But how do you think Starmer gets over the problem that he just now looks a bit shifty? And that's devastating to a Prime Minister's reputation. Personally, I don't think he is. I don't think he's an evil man. But he's so unable to operate politically.
But I mean, this is my point about the fact that I don't think they would have done it. That's why I don't believe all this business about, we're frightened of reform would win all 4. It wasn't down to that. It was simply down to the fact they just couldn't get their act together.
OK, do you think, Claire, to show that they're not shifty, they should give up on the idea of changing the voting system? Because to my mind, that is the most suspicious bit of it. You delay by 2 years. In that 2-year period, you're switching to a voting system that is more favourable to you.
Exactly. And if you've got the Prime Minister saying that we're going to be open and transparent, but then you're going to change the voting system in a way that's going to favour you as a party, absolutely makes him look completely shifty. He doesn't get that you can't run a government by committee, which is what he's trying to do. And you can imagine sitting around a table and all these ideas being thrown in sound really great. Go to the electorate, not so much.
Now you should listen to the electorate more. Well, thank you very much to Nigel Nelson and to Claire Pearsall and